You are naughty man.
You're not
propaganda.
the propaganda.
Oh, naughty
Or naughty moo.
to propaganda.
To propaganda.
Naughty man. And you never would.
I'll never learn to fetch or play hide and seek. I won't become a trapeze artist because PETA killed me.
Shockingly, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals has killed more than 33,000 animals since 1998. Don't support the hypocrites at PETA. Support your local animal shelter. Find out more at PETAkillsanimals.com.
How to easily avoid falling for blatant propaganda. A case study. Step 1. Use basic media literacy. If you see a source with an obvious motive like PETAkillsanimals.com, please do the bare minimum and go to their website. The contact page on PETAkillsanimals.com states that it is, quote, a project of the Center for Consumer Freedom. So, again, doing just the bare minimum, let's Google the Center for Consumer Freedom, and hey, it's an astroturfing front by some dude named Richard Berman. So other than claiming that PETA kills animals, what other hot takes does Richard Berman have? Increasing the minimum wage is bad. Trans fats are good. Eating animals is good. Eating plants is bad and is akin to a fake orgasm. Drinking animal milk is good. Drinking plant milk is bad. PETA is bad, obviously, and the Humane Society is also bad. Skinning animals for fur is good, actually. Pipelines for fossil fuels are good. Fracking is good. Solar energy is bad. Wind energy is bad. Environmental Protection Agency is bad. Inhaling secondhand smoke is your constitutional right. Drunk driving is good, actually. Regulating harmful chemicals in water is bad. Plastic bottles are good, and reusable bottles are bad. Plastic wrap protects the planet, and finally, Jason Momoa made an Instagram post against single-use plastics and is therefore bad. Hashtag moronic Momoa.
Visit moronicmomoa.com to learn why Momoa, and not plastic water bottles, is the problem.
Anyway, congratulations. You're done. You can basically ignore everything Richard Berman has to say because he's obviously a corporate shill and an asshole to boot. And since PETAkillsanimals.com is a Richard Berman project, you can safely assume that that's bullshit too.
It's so easy.
Oh god, this is difficult to get into. The perfect YouTube setup. That's what this is. Step 2. Waste a couple of days digging into this anyway. Welcome to the investigation couch, I guess. So, in 1995, corporate lobbyist Richard Berman is paid by the tobacco industry to create the CCF, or the Center for Consumer Freedom. And he does this in order to fight smoking bans in restaurants on behalf of the tobacco industry. Obviously, the tobacco industry can't themselves advocate for being able to smoke at a restaurant because everyone knows by that point that that gives you cancer. So they need like a third-party white knight to come in and defend their honor, and so they pay Berman to do it. The issue was framed as being about consumer freedom and your freedom to smoke, as opposed to your freedom to give cancer to whoever's adjacent to you at the restaurant. At the same time, PETA is starting to fuck with the meat industry by basically just filming what they're doing and getting Alec Baldwin to narrate the footage.
What you are about to see is beyond your worst nightmares.
The meat industry, of course, wants to clap back and attack PETA, but they kind of can't because if they attacked PETA, then that would just bring more eyeballs onto the horrific slaughterhouse footage. So over time, Tyson, Wendy's, White Castle, Purdue, Standard Meat, Applebee's, and so on all gave some cash to the Center for Consumer Freedom instead. This way, it's not We Kill Animals Incorporated that is going after an animal rights group. Instead, it's the nebulous and kind of inoffensive sounding Center for Consumer Freedom. So, in 2004, having accumulated a bunch of cash from the meat industry, the CCF creates PETAkillsanimals.com. In 2005, the website is launched for real, and to advertise it, Richard buys an ad in Times Square. which reads simply and ominously PETAKillsAnimals.com.
Find out more at PETAKillsAnimals.com.
The website at the time states, from July 1998 through the end of 2003, PETA killed over 1,000 dogs, cats, and other, quote, companion animals at its Norfolk, Virginia headquarters. PETA kills animals, and its leaders dare lecture the rest of us. My inner Tucker Carlson sways in a gentle victorious samba. So to back this up, Berman's got a table with data from the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, or VDACS for short. In the state of Virginia, all shelters have to report on how many animals they take in, how many they kill, how many are adopted out, etc. So now, simply add up the killed column over the past 2 decades, and you get 47,000 animals killed at the PETA shelter.
Now you know PETA kills animals and is using your donations to do it. Find out more.
This is a very serious accusation made by what I would call a not very credible source. So let's take a look at some context. What actually is PETA's quote-unquote shelter? Well, if you search for what PETA has to say, here's what you get. PETA operates what could be called a shelter of last resort for the most broken animals. When impoverished families cannot afford to pay a veterinarian to let a suffering and or aged animal leave this world, PETA will help. So basically, if your pet needs to be put to sleep and you can't afford the service, PETA will provide the service for free. So then the question is, does PETA run an adoption shelter where they just choose to kill most of the animals, as Berman claims, or do they run a euthanasia clinic where you can put your pet to sleep for free? Well, if you go back to PETAKillsAnimals.com, you can find this header. State inspector likens PETA's quote shelter to a quote euthanasia clinic. The great state of Virginia has a state inspector for shelters, and they go from shelter to shelter and check whether everything's okay. The reports of these inspections are publicly available, and here's a quote from one from 2010. PETA's shelter is not accessible to the public, promoted, or engaged in efforts to facilitate the adoption of animals taken into custody. PETA Reception has historically been unaware of the existence of an animal shelter and has stated to inquiring members of the public that no such facility exists. Which is to say that there are no facilities for adoption at the PETA HQ, and PETA does not advertise adoption as a service that they provide. We can also take a look at some of the official statistics that are provided by VDACS. So, in 2022, in terms of animals, PETA's quote-unquote shelter took in 2.8 thousand, transferred 663 out to other shelters, adopted out
78
animals themselves to like friends and family, and killed
2,130
animals. PETA is involved with 1.2% of all animals in shelters in Virginia, but they account for 10% of the euthanasia cases, which is to say that they basically just do euthanasia, which all basically tracks with the idea that PETA runs a euthanasia clinic. Notice also that they transferred 663 animals out to other shelters. The idea is that if the animal is adoptable, PETA will transfer them out to an adoption shelter. I don't think that PETA should use the term shelter of last resort for the euthanasia clinic, but I know why they do it. Euthanasia clinics do not get tax breaks, but animal shelters do. So, PETA's official statements, state inspections, and official statistics all line up with the idea that PETA runs a euthanasia clinic. And that is 100% of Richard Berman's grift here. He is taking a euthanasia clinic, misrepresenting it as an adoption service, and then complaining that there's a whole lot of euthanasia going on at this euthanasia clinic that he's calling an adoption service. It is a trick as old as time. You take a statistic that looks bad if you omit all the context, and then you present the statistic without any context. Despite making up 13% of the population, and then you have to spend an hour saying that no, it's out of context, no, the interpretation is wrong, no, you're an asshole. Now, you could say that maybe PETA should run an adoption shelter, and maybe that's true. But you could also argue back by saying that, well, if all the shelters in Virginia are already full, then building another one would just basically act as a warehouse for animals. The idea then is that you could try to decrease supply by neutering and increase demand by encouraging people to adopt as opposed to buy from breeders, and just encouraging people to adopt in general, and PETA does all of the above. It should also be noted that if you trust PETA to report their own numbers, they do help a lot of animals to stay in their homes. According to PETA, in 2022, they, quote, assisted more than 3,000 indigent families in keeping animals they were about to give up by providing free medical services. But of course, that is exactly what an animal-hating, animal rights organization would say. That's how they get you. You could also say that even though companion animals obviously deserve, respect and compassion and protection, it's the animals that we eat that are the most abused. For every one animal that is euthanized in a shelter in the Great United States, there are 25,000 animals that are killed for consumption. So maybe it makes sense for PETA to focus on that problem. In summary, a career astroturfer, paid by the meat industry, took a relatively small euthanasia clinic, misrepresented it as an adoption shelter, then spent millions of dollars advertising his own lie via a transparently disingenuous website, all while, of course, minimizing anything PETA might do for non-human animals. And I think that the line that best showcases who this is all for is PETA kills animals, and its leaders dare lecture the rest of us. PETAKillsAnimals.com isn't really trying to convince anyone of anything. If I don't have a negative preconception of the animal rights movement, then of course I will look into a source that sounds as suspicious as PETAKillsAnimals.com, and then I'll find all of Richard Berman's bullshit, and that'll be the end of that. No. The actual tactic is to validate the anti-animal rights sentiment that the audience already has. Allow me to put on my carnivore hat. I actually can't put it on because it fucks up the exposure. I am hurt by the animal rights movement because they correctly point out that I am paying people to hurt animals on my behalf, despite the fact that I would personally never hurt an animal. In fact, if someone hurt my dog, I would kill them. By pointing out this contradiction, PETA and other animal rights organizations are making me feel insecure in my identity. So now along comes Richard Berman, and he gives me this talking point that sounds like a dunk that I can use to defend myself. PETA kills animals, and its leaders dare lecture me? Also notice how it's PETA lecturing us, not just me, so that way I can set up like a in-group, out-group type of thing. Everything is always about feelings. But surely, someone who is all about the pursuit of truth and exposés and checking their sources, surely someone like that would never fall for obvious bullshit like this, right?
You are naughty man.
You're into propaganda.
You're into propaganda.
And you never will.
You are naughty man.
You're naughty man. And you never will.
Look, I know that this is a very dramatic lighting setup, but I need to maintain viewer retention, and I think that if I don't change set in every section, then people will get bored and click away. So, there. How to be a useful idiot for corporate astroturfing. A case study. iilluminaughtii, who also goes by Blair, is by all metrics an extremely successful YouTuber. Since joining the platform in 2013, she has amassed slightly north of 200 million views, which is likely an underestimate, since she has removed all videos prior to 2019. She has 1.6 million subscribers. Her channel focuses on slightly left-leaning exposés, so stuff like everything wrong with Jordan Peterson, Elon Musk, Andrew Tate, olive oil, Airbnb, multi-level marketing, etc. She has produced 164 videos in the past year alone, averaging 1.5 hours of content per week. In order to get this done, she appears to employ 6 editors and just one poor and probably overworked writer. She's literally making 100 times more videos than this channel. Like, comment, and subscribe to see another video in 6 months. So she's making exposés, and she's doing it at a very serious speed. Okay, well, Finn has decided to partake in this video. That's cool. Maybe you can hear him purr. Ooh, ah! This is the way it works. He comes over, he gets some affection, and then he leaves. He's happy now. Blair has to quickly produce clickable content that appears to be well researched, despite the fact that she does not have the time to do the actual research. So that is basically fine in the case of like Andrew Tate, because a good video on Andrew Tate basically just calls Andrew Tate a cunt. But if someone, let's say, gee, I don't know, off the top of my head, a corporate lobbyist comes along and creates a click-worthy narrative with what looks like decent sourcing, Blair will, more likely than not, fall for it. Which, of course, she does. Blair has produced 8 videos which involve PETA, totaling nearly 3.5 hours of content, which has cumulatively been viewed around 9 million times. And that's just Blair. Making videos on why PETA sucks is actually a YouTube cottage industry. Blair will often make a point of talking about her very thorough and rigorous sourcing policy.
But no sources. No fucking sources. That's kind of an issue to me. I know when I do more of my investigative videos and stuff like that, those longer form content, I know that I always will cite my sources, and I always have a gigantic pastebin list of every single source used in my videos.
So let's take a look at these gigantic source lists. God, you can't even say it with a straight face. Oh, hey, look, we have the Center for Consumer Freedom, off to a great start. We've got PETAkillsanimals.com, I hear that's a quality source. And hey, look at that, we've also got activistfacts.com. Do you want to guess who runs that? I'll give you a hint. It has an entire section dedicated to Jason Momoa and what an idiot he is for saying that single-use plastics are bad, actually. What I'm basically saying is that Blair and a whole lot of other YouTubers are useful idiots. And you don't have to just like, trust me, I can prove it.
According to the state of Virginia, PETA's track record of rescuing animals is actually pretty abysmal. 2,455 animals were killed in PETA's shelter in 2014, with only 162 being adopted into new homes.
Funnily enough, the website that Blair is citing here is not in the sources that she's listing. It's actually a website called religionnews.com, which, sure, I guess. And hey, would you look at that? If you read the rest of the article that Blair cites, you can find quotes like these. Quote, if you take the very worst problems that others can't solve, your rate of putting dogs down is going to be much higher than anybody's who has taken on the simple problems, the easy ones. The article also literally says, the euthanasia clinic is on the ground floor. But again, religionnews.com didn't just like happen to come across PETA's euthanasia clinic. The source of this narrative and the reason that it's in the news is Richard Berman. So then, Blair has to choose between these options. 1. Read the article she's citing for more nuance. 2. Try to find the actual origin of the information she's reading. Or 3. Cherry-pick information from various articles and parrot a corporate narrative to 1.6 million viewers. As you can probably tell from the concentric circles of lies that are slowly swirling around my head, Blair did not make the correct choice.
However, before that, in 2009, the state of Virginia was petitioned by a lobbyist group to reclassify the PETA headquarters from an animal shelter to a slaughterhouse.
Again, for some strange reason, this screenshot that Blair is using is not in the sources list, but I can find it for you. It's right there on centerforconsumerfreedom.com. Berman is getting paid. Blair is just citing corporate propaganda for free and fun. But you know what's even worse? She didn't even read the article. In the article, they have a letter from the CCF to a Virginia official, which basically explains what's going on. PETA wants the tax break of operating as a, quote, humane society / releasing agency. And the CCF itself basically states that PETA doesn't run a shelter, they run a euthanasia clinic. You can't call up PETA's HQ and say, hey, I have got this dog and I would like to put them up for adoption. PETA's HQ provides a lot of services for animals, but that is not one of them. So, to break this down, Blair doesn't cite the source she's using. The uncited source she's using is a corporate front, and the corporate front she's using, despite not citing it, contradicts her. You're doing really well, Blair. Don't let the haters get you down.
There are even cases where family pets were stolen from homes only to be euthanized at their so-called shelters. PETA was found culpable for 2 of their affiliates, Victoria Carey and Jennifer Wood, taking a pet Chihuahua named Maya from the property of a family of a 9-year-old named Cynthia Zarate, and later having the animal euthanized.
Okay, let's read the article Blair is citing, and oh, hey, look at that. Both parties said in a joint statement, quote, PETA again apologizes and expresses its regrets to the Zarat family for the loss of their dog, Maya. Mr. Zarat acknowledges that this was an unfortunate mistake by PETA and the individuals involved, with no ill will toward the Zarat family. So, maybe somewhat unsurprisingly, Blair did not read her own source, and her source contradicts her. PETA was not found culpable, and the Zarat family acknowledges that it was an accident, as does the Accomack County's Commonwealth Attorney. Indeed, it is more probable under this evidence that the 2 women associated with PETA that day believed they were gathering animals that posed a health and or livestock threat in the trailer park. The thing is that Blair is making this video in 2020, whereas the Chihuahua thing happened in 2014 and was finished litigating in 2017. I mean, there's even a Snopes article about it. The work is already done. PETA was asked to come to euthanize wild dogs. They did everything in broad daylight. They were explicitly told that all dogs without a collar or tag are wild. The Chihuahua had neither collar nor tag. The Chihuahua left the Zarat yard before coming back. Zarat's other dog, which by the way has a doghouse that was provided by PETA free of charge, was not taken. And no other pets in the trailer park were taken. But all of this context doesn't fit the Center for Consumer Freedom narrative that Blair has committed to, and so out it goes. And instead, Blair talks about how PETA hates pets and is probably coming to kill yours like tomorrow. And so now, here is what happens. Blair has committed to a narrative, and so now she's going to approach everything as possible evidence for that narrative. To a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And to a YouTuber that doesn't know how to check their sources, everything looks like evidence.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at PETA's Twitter and just see some of the stuff that I saw, because obviously, as you guys saw from my tweet, I'm not really a big fan of you smashing up somebody's car and then spray painting it because you want to protest something because of the brand that that car is. So,
okay, so according to Blair, these people that took time out of their day to protest cruelty to dogs in dog racing have hijacked a random vehicle and torched it as part of their protest. So now, Blair, who does exposés for a living, and I cannot stress this enough, her whole shtick is that she investigates stuff. Now Blair has 2 options. 1, find the source of the photo and see whether what she is blasting out to 600,000 people is an obvious lie. Or she can go ahead and fire off a hot take without taking even the bare minimum steps to check whether she's wrong. And of course, it takes like 3 seconds of Googling to find out that, of course, the protesters brought the car as part of the protest. Notice though that this wasn't on PETAKillsAnimals.com or Center for Consumer Freedom or whatever. Blair is now making up new stuff because she is committed to a narrative. As another example, Blair sees that PETA is against dog racing, and so now, of course, Blair has to come out and say that dog racing is good, actually. This is how Blair talks about a dog race, where the dogs are forced to run 160 kilometers per day for 10 days straight.
There are a fair amount of dogs that they are Arctic dogs, and that's kind of like where they live. There are animals in the Arctic that's literally what they do. This is just kind of like an organized team of them kind of doing it, and it's something that was done for many years. Like, it's like, just wait until PETA finds out that horses used to be used before cars existed. It's like, how about you just like shush, maybe?
If I cycle for 100 kilometers in one day, my knees are fucked. And these dogs have to run for 160 kilometers for 10 days straight, using their legs. Of course, if you do the bare minimum research, you'll find out that the dogs are, of course, abused, and that sometimes they die. Wouldn't it be terrible if this was part of a well-documented and broadly known trend of people abusing animals for entertainment? Crazy. So, again, Blair is saying that dog racing is good, actually, and that PETA, the people for the ethical treatment of animals, are wrong. It's cool though. Blair's dog breeder told her that dog racing is cool. Again, her dog breeder. You know, dog breeders. The people that are famously, really concerned with animal welfare.
I saw this about the Iditarod, which apparently PETA is saying is inhumane. My understanding is a lot of working dogs used to do this as part of their job. Like, this wasn't like an event. Like, this is what people did living way up north, and they developed a really like intense bond between their owners, their human owners, and like the pack, and they would help carry things, and they enjoy working. And that's something that my breeder told me about, is like, your dog wants and needs tasks, like to be busy and happy in life. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, I would never like think of that,
And Blair's audience loves it. If they were to take my cat or dog out of my ownership, I swear on my beloved mother's grave that they would pay the true price. Death by lethal injection. Call that poetic justice. You're so badass with your YouTube comment there, buddy. Galaxy Pancakes, oh whoa! I find it amazing that PETA blocked you on Twitter because you essentially exposed them. The Meme Gamer. That's a fucking quality handle if I've ever seen one. If PETA took my dog from me and put it down the same day, I would probably just turn into John Wick. PETA needs to be shut down and Newkirk thrown in jail. These people are beyond crazy.
So I decided to go to Twitter and I asked you guys, what's the first thing you think of when you hear PETA? And my god, none of you held back. A vast majority of you had a top-of-mind comment revolving around murdering animals and their abysmal kill shelter rates. For me, that would be a huge red flag if I was working for them. If my nonprofit's top of mind for many, many people is murdering animals while my mission statement is about protecting animal rights, then something very clearly went amiss.
Yeah, Blair, it's super crazy about how your audience hates PETA and about how they cite a bunch of corporate propaganda to support that opinion. I wonder where they might have gotten that from. And so now, all of these impressionable 14-year-olds will go on to rail against an international animal rights group, all while thinking that they are sticking it to the man, while literally participating in corporate astroturfing. And so the cycle begins anew with tomorrow's useful idiots.